this lesson, I want to spend just a few minutes drawing up our code a bit and extracting some lengthier code I see repeated throughout our store file. Dry, D-R-Y, stands for Don't Repeat Yourself. It's a philosophy for code that not only is easier to read, but also easier to maintain and extend as it makes common functionality or configuration variables readily available. You'll see what I mean in this lesson. It's common practice in most any language or framework to have a helpers directory where we can store any general and reusable functions. Since we won't have many right now, we'll just add a single index.js file. The first method I want to create is going to be called findById. If you look throughout the store file, you'll see that it is very common to look through a particular array of resources to find a single one of those resources by an ID. For instance, here we are looking through the users to find the user with a particular ID, that is, the ID of the signed in user. Here, we are looking through the threads to find a thread with the ID that matches our ID parameter. Here, we are looking through the forums to find the forum that matches a certain ID. In all these instances and more, you can see the same pattern. Call .find on the resources array and provide a callback function that compares the ID property on each resource to some given ID. So, let's extract our helper function now. In the new helper file, let's create and export a function. The function will need to take a resources param and an ID param. The resources param is an array of resources that we want to look through, i.e., posts, forums, threads, users, etc. The ID is the ID of the resource that we want to find. Let's just paste in the code from one of the instances in the store and change out the variables. State.forums becomes resources. Forum can just be R, or in other words, the current resource being iterated over. And finally, forum ID becomes ID, that is, referring to the ID param of the function. Cool. Now let's go put our helper function to good use in the store. First, we need to import our helper function. I'll look for all the instances of .find in this file in order to help us move a little bit more quickly. I mentioned earlier that helper functions are meant to be more general use and reusable throughout the codebase, And the find by ID function is actually a perfect example of that. We can search for .find throughout the codebase and use the new find by ID for many of those instances as well. I won't make you watch me replace every instance, but essentially I'll do exactly what I did in the store file, and you can see exactly what changed in the source code link below. I've gone through all of the other code and replaced instances of .find with find by ID where I could, and then I've checked everything in the browser just to make sure everything still works. And yeah, I think everything looks good. There is one more piece of functionality in the store that I think merits being extracted into a helper function. Take a look at the code for the set thread and the set post actions. They are essentially identical, just with the instances of thread switched out for post and vice versa. The point of the code in each action is meant to update the resource if it exists, and if it doesn't exist, add it to the array of resources. In code speak, this is often called an upsert. Think of it as the words update and insert smushed together. While we'd only be cleaning up two functions by extracting this code into a helper function, I still think it's a good candidate for extraction for a couple of different reasons. One, it's complex enough to not want to have to write it more than once. Two, if you think about it, upserting could become a very common thing, done not just for threads and posts, but also for users and forums, and then who knows what else as our app grows. So let's do it. In the helper file, let's create and export the upsert method. It will take two parameters: the array of resources that act as the source of truth for existing resources, and the new resource to be added. Alright, now let's copy the meat of the set post action and paste it in. Let's change out these variables to come from our parameters on the function. Oh, and it looks like I misspelled upsert as well. Finally, let's use the upsert method inside of our actions. Let's import it and then use it. We don't need all this stuff anymore. Alright, one more time, let's make sure we didn't break anything. Great, we've dried up our code and everything is still functioning.